Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I was interested to hear my colleague from North Dakota, my friend from North Dakota, talking about this tax bill because sadly there's not been a lot of bipartisan work on the bill. And I really agree that there's a consensus that tax reform is long overdue, but we need tax reform that simplifies the tax code, that bolsters the middle class, and that helps small businesses create jobs. I think those principles could have been the basis for really good bipartisan work here in the Senate and in Congress generally to come up with a bill that would have done all of those things. But unfortunately, the legislation in front of us does none. The result is a partisan tax bill written in secret without public hearings that adds to the national debt, that punishes the middle class and small businesses, and that gives massive tax cuts to corporations and the wealthy. Now, last week I came to the floor to share the concerns of Granite Staters about this legislation. They were amplified at a forum that I had on Monday at Southern New Hampshire University, where I heard from students, graduate students from higher education leaders in the state about the damage that this bill would do to our state and to our national economy. Now, I've heard some reports today that there are going to be some changes that come out of this conference that may address some of the concerns about the bill's impact on education. I hope that's true, because unfortunately, I haven't heard what those changes are. I don't know that any Democrats here have heard what those changes are. And unfortunately, the negotiations, like the bill, are being done in secret, and the future of students and so many people in New Hampshire and the country hang in the balance. In particular, what I heard at the forum with the students and educators was that the bill, as it passed the House and Senate, would raise taxes on New Hampshire students and would make it financially impossible for many of them to continue their educations. As passed, the House tax bill would eliminate the ability of individuals to deduct the interest that they pay on their student loan debt. And nationwide, student loan debt has roughly tripled since 2004. It now totals a staggering $1.3 trillion, more than the total credit card debt in the country. And for us in New Hampshire, it's particularly burdensome because New Hampshire's 2016 graduating class had the highest per capita student loan debt in the country, an average of $36,367. And the Republican leader's tax bill would make this crisis far worse, not only for current students, but for those who graduated many years ago but are still burdened by student loan debt. It would prevent nearly 80,000 Granite Staters from deducting interest on their student loans. The House legislation would also make it far more expensive to get an advanced degree because it eliminates tax-free waivers for tuition assistance. I'm hearing recent reports that this provision may be taken out of the final bill. I certainly hope that's the case, because as it's currently written, it would put graduate students financially out of reach for the cost of their education. A Dartmouth student pursuing a PhD in biomedical sciences wrote to us that counting tuition waivers as earned income would raise his yearly taxes by more than $10,000. He said that he would no longer be able to afford rent and groceries and that he would have to consider dropping out of school. As the Associate Vice President for Student Financial Services at Franklin Pierce University told me, Ken Ferrara, he said in no uncertain terms that tuition waivers are not income and that it's wrong to tax them. I could not agree more. Tyler Kane is pursuing a master's degree in environmental engineering at the University of New Hampshire, and he told me that he already owes close to $40,000 in student loans. He works nearly 60 hours a week. After paying rent and other expenses, his stipend leaves him with less than $200 a month. Now, if his tuition waiver becomes taxable, that would be a tax increase of $2,500, and it would wreck his budget, leaving him with a $33 a month hole. Along with many of his graduate student colleagues, he would have to consider dropping out of school. It makes no sense to increase the burden of student debt and to impose new taxes on graduate students struggling to get by so that we can give the biggest corporations in this country and the wealthiest a tax cut. It's estimated that by 2020, 2/3 of all jobs in the U.S. will require some form of higher education. And yet today, fewer than 45% of Americans have at least a 2-year degree. As I talk with small business owners across New Hampshire, one of their biggest challenges is finding skilled workers. The last thing we need to do is to make education more expensive and unaffordable for millions of young Americans. As one New Hampshire businessman told me, he said it's like eating our own seed corn. For the United States to stay competitive in the global economy, we can't afford to discourage talented young people from going to college or pursuing a graduate degree. I also had the opportunity to talk with Nate Stafford. He's pursuing a PhD at the University of New Hampshire, and because he serves as a teaching assistant, the university provides a tuition waiver of nearly $27,000, which would be taxed under the provision of the House bill. If his tuition waiver were taxed, that would force him to consider opting out of graduate school entirely. And I also heard from university administrators who shared their concerns. Sister Paula Marie Bewley, president of Rivier University, pointed out that the proposed new taxes on students is really a tax on our future. Jan Nesbitt, the senior vice provost for research at the University of New Hampshire, warned that taxing graduate student tuition waivers would have a cascading impact that would raise undergraduate tuition across the board, because losing graduate students would affect both teaching assistants and research and drive up costs. And then I heard from Carrie Moorhead, who's the interim dean of the graduate school at the University of New Hampshire. And she pointed out that many international students at UNH would be lost, and noted that Canada has recently seen more than a 40% increase in international students. And they're very pleased to be benefiting from the brain drain from the United States because of the financial barriers that we're putting up for graduate students. And then the other damaging aspect of this legislation that I think many people are not aware of is that the tuition assistance that many companies provide to their employees would count as taxable income. Now, 40 years ago, Congress provided employers with the flexibility to offer up to $5,250 in annual tax-free educational benefits to employees. This was designed to advance competitiveness and fill the need for more skilled workers. If we eliminate those benefits, how many of those employees who are looking to advance themselves through education will not be able to do that? In so many ways, this tax overhaul legislation would take America backward, not forward. Tax reform should be about helping Americans to prepare for the jobs of the 21st century. It shouldn't make it harder to afford college or graduate school. Tax reform should be about strengthening the middle class, not burdening it with higher taxes. Tax reform should be about growing the economy, not growing the deficits and the debt. Like my colleagues on this side of the aisle, I'm eager to work to genuinely reform the tax code. Reform is long overdue, but the bill we have before us is not reform. We need a bipartisan bill that puts the middle class first, puts small businesses first, and doesn't leave a massive debt for our children and grandchildren. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.